I still remember the way the keys felt in my hand the day I bought the house. Heavier than they should have been, like they carried more than metal and teeth. Like they held years of saving, saying no, starting over, and proving, mostly to myself, that I could finally build something that was mine. It wasn't a mansion or anything extravagant, but it was new, clean, quiet, and for the first time in my life, no one else's opinions lived in its walls. I walked through the rooms alone that first evening, touching door frames, opening cabinets, standing by the windows longer than necessary, letting the silence settle around me like a reward I had waited far too long to earn. My parents knew about the house. Of course they did. They had known about every milestone in my life, even the ones they didn't fully support. They congratulated me politely, asked a few surface-level questions, and reminded me, more than once, that family should always come before personal comfort. I nodded like I always did. I had learned long ago that disagreeing openly only led to lectures, comparisons, and subtle reminders of everything my sister needed more than I did. My sister had always needed more help, more understanding, more forgiveness. She had a husband who couldn't keep a job and 3 kids who somehow became everyone else's responsibility whenever things got tight. Every crisis in her life arrived with an unspoken expectation that someone, usually me, would absorb the impact. I helped when I could, stepped back when I had to, and told myself that boundaries didn't make me selfish, even when my parents hinted otherwise. The house was supposed to be different. I moved slowly, intentionally. I didn't rush to fully furnish it. I wanted to enjoy the feeling of arrival. I spent my first week sleeping on a mattress on the floor, eating takeout on the counter, listening to the unfamiliar creaks at night and smiling because they were mine. For once, no one dropped by unannounced. No one commented on my choices. No one asked what I was planning to do next. Then work pulled me out of town for a few days. It was routine. 2 nights. Maybe 3. I locked the doors, double-checked the windows, and left with the quiet comfort of knowing I was returning to something stable, something untouched. When I pulled back into the driveway, the first thing I noticed was the car. Not mine. An old minivan sat crookedly near the garage, packed so full it sagged in the back. Toys spilled out of the trunk. A dented stroller leaned against the side of my house. I sat there longer than I should have, engine still running, trying to convince myself there was a reasonable explanation I just hadn't considered yet. Then I saw the lights on inside. I walked to the front door slowly, every step heavier than the last, and when I unlocked it, the lock turned too easily, like it had already been used that day. The smell hit me first, food I didn't cook, laundry soap I didn't buy, a faint sweetness that didn't belong to me. Shoes lined the entryway. Small shoes. Backpacks. A jacket I recognized instantly, because I had seen my sister wear it 100 times. I stepped inside, heart pounding, and that was when I heard my mother's voice from the kitchen. Calm and casual, like she was exactly where she belonged. "Oh good," she said. "You're home." My sister's kids ran past me, laughing, dragging toys across my living room floor. My sister herself stood near the counter, already comfortable, already settled, like this had always been the plan. My father sat at the table, flipping through mail that had my name on it. No one looked guilty. No one looked surprised. I asked what was going on, even though I already knew the answer. My mother sighed, the way she did when she thought I was being difficult. She told me my sister needed help, that the kids needed stability, that this house was too big for just one person anyway. She said they had spare keys. She said they couldn't wait, because it was an emergency. She said family doesn't ask for permission when someone needs a place to land. I stood there listening as my home was explained away. I looked around at the walls I hadn't finished decorating, the rooms I hadn't fully lived in yet, and felt something inside me crack. Not loudly, not dramatically, but deeply. This wasn't just about space. It was about a line that had been crossed so easily they didn't even see it anymore. They hadn't asked. They hadn't warned me. They had decided. And as I stood in the doorway of the house I had worked so hard to claim, I realized that buying it had been the easy part. Keeping it might cost me everything else. That night I didn't sleep in my own bedroom. I lay on the couch instead, staring at the ceiling fan as it turned slowly above me, listening to unfamiliar sounds fill the house I had imagined would finally be quiet. The kids argued over a tablet in the next room. My sister laughed softly in the kitchen, already at ease. My parents whispered about logistics, about school zones and grocery lists, like this had been planned weeks ago. Every sound reminded me that I was a guest in the space I owned. In the morning, my sister acted cheerful, almost relieved. She thanked me the way people thank you when they assume the answer was always yes. She talked about how long they'd stay just until things stabilize, how grateful the kids were to have a yard, how this house was such a blessing for the family. My parents nodded along, satisfied, as if the matter had already been resolved simply by agreement among themselves. I tried to speak. I really did. I mentioned boundaries. I said this was my home, that I needed to be asked before something like this happened. My mother frowned, not angrily but disappointed, like I had missed an obvious lesson. She told me I was being rigid. My father said I should think of this as temporary, that generosity always comes back around. No one acknowledged the fact that my consent had never been part of the equation. Days passed. Temporary turned into routine. My sister rearranged furniture without asking. The kids scribbled on a wall I hadn't painted yet. A box of my things disappeared to make room for theirs. Every time I brought up a concern, I was reminded of how much worse things would be for my sister if I didn't cooperate. Every protest was reframed as selfishness. I started coming home later. Not because I was busy, but because walking through that front door felt like walking into an argument I was expected to lose politely. Friends noticed. One asked me why I looked like a guest in my own life. I laughed it off, but the truth sat heavy in my chest. One evening, I came home to find my father giving my sister advice about staying longer, about saving money, about how smart it was that they didn't have to pay rent. He spoke proudly, like this arrangement was proof of good parenting. I realized then that in their eyes, my house had never really been mine. It was family property the moment I made the mistake of letting them know I owned it. That realization hurt more than the invasion itself. I started keeping records quietly. Text messages, dates, photos of changes made without permission, mail opened by someone else. I wasn't plotting revenge. I was protecting myself, because I finally understood that good intentions didn't stop people from crossing lines when they believed they were entitled to your sacrifice. One night, after another tense conversation, my sister snapped. She said I should be grateful I didn't have kids, that I had it easier, that I didn't really need all this space anyway. My parents didn't correct her. They just sat there, silent, letting the implication settle. That was the moment something shifted. I went to my room, closed the door, and sat on the bed in the dark. For years, I had been the reasonable one, the accommodating one, the one who made room. But standing there, listening to my family live comfortably at my expense, I realized that if I didn't draw a line now, there would never be one. The next morning, I made a decision I knew would change everything. I called a lawyer. Calling a lawyer felt unreal at first, like I was overreacting, like I was betraying something sacred. But as I sat there explaining what had happened, hearing the words out loud stripped them of all the excuses my family had wrapped around them. The lawyer didn't interrupt or soften anything. She asked simple questions. Did anyone have permission to live there? Were they paying rent? Did I give them keys willingly? Each answer made the situation clearer and heavier at the same time. By the end of the call, she told me calmly that what my parents had done wasn't generosity, it was trespass, and what my sister was doing wasn't temporary, it was occupation. That night, I barely slept. Not because I doubted the decision, but because I knew what would come next. I had spent my whole life avoiding conflict by shrinking myself, by convincing everyone that I didn't need as much as they did. This time, there was no version of events where everyone stayed comfortable. The notice went out 2 days later. Polite, legal, clear. 30 days. My parents were furious. My mother cried and asked how I could do this to family. My father accused me of being heartless, of choosing paperwork over people. My sister called me cruel and said I was traumatizing her children. Every reaction confirmed what I had already learned. None of them were upset about crossing my boundaries. They were upset about losing access. For weeks, the house felt tense and heavy. Conversations stopped when I entered rooms. Doors slammed. I was blamed for every inconvenience. But slowly, something else happened too. They started packing. Quietly. Reluctantly. Reality crept in where entitlement had lived before. On the day they moved out, my sister didn't say goodbye. My parents left without looking back. The house felt empty in a way it never had before. Not lonely. Clear. I walked through each room after they were gone. The scuffed walls. The moved furniture. The silence returning, piece by piece. I opened the windows and let fresh air in. I stood in the middle of the living room and breathed, really breathed, for the first time since buying the place. The fallout didn't end quickly. Holidays were tense. Calls went unanswered. I was labeled difficult, ungrateful, changed. And maybe I had. But something else changed too. I stopped apologizing for needing space. I stopped explaining why my boundaries mattered. I stopped confusing love with access. Months later, my mother tried to talk about putting it all behind us. I told her we could talk, but only if my home was respected as mine. Nos perquis. No assumptions. No decisions made without me. She hesitated. Then she agreed. That hesitation told me everything I needed to know. Now when I unlock my front door, it opens to quiet, to order, to a life that feels like it belongs to me again. The house is no longer a symbol of conflict. It's a reminder that building something doesn't mean surrendering it. They gave my new home to my sister's family without telling me. I took it back. And for the first time, I didn't feel guilty for choosing myself.